Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on a brand new series on Amorgate Radio Communications titled Succession Management and Institution Building. My name is Tolu Omadara. Happy New Year, and thank you so much for being with us. It's such a joy, such a delight, a privilege to have you with us. Now, let me start by saying that a new year is a time for new hopes, new dreams, new plans, new aspirations, right? And the reality is that one of the things that we should be planning as organizations at whatever level is succession. Whether you are a public sector institution or a private sector organization or a strong non-profit organization, it is important for you to be thinking succession. And I'm going to ask some critical questions in this introductory session. It is an introductory session. However, we are still going to go as deep as possible. Some of the questions I'll be asking are, of course, introductory / definitional questions, so to say. 1, what exactly is succession management? 2, what are institutions? 3, why do we need to build an institution? And number 4, which is very critical, can institutions be built without effective succession management? I'm going to take those questions again. 1, what exactly is succession management? 2, what are institutions? 3, why do we need to build an institution? And 4, can institutions be built without effective succession management? Now, in answering these questions, we're going to explore certain themes and go into certain other areas, but all of it is leading up to the issue of ensuring that we do not just have an organization that thrives today, but one that exists and can be sustained far beyond the now. Again, welcome to this exciting new series on Amorgate Radio Communications titled Succession Management and Institution Building. My name is Tolu Omadara, and it's a delight to have you with us today. Now, let's start with the issue of what exactly is succession management. Largely speaking, when we talk about succession management, let's establish the fact that to a very large extent, we are not talking about managing succession for every single role in the organization. Not necessarily, to be honest. The reality is that succession management in this context, especially the one that is responsible for building institution, largely has to do with ensuring that the right people are in the right leadership and management positions as at the time needed. I'll say that again. Succession management in this context of building institutions, largely has to do with ensuring that the right people are in the right leadership and management positions as at when needed. Why are we seeming to limit the conversation on succession management to not every single role in the organization, but almost largely to mainly to leadership and management positions? Because the truth is that leaders build institutions. I'll say that again. Leaders, genuine leaders, thorough leaders, effective leaders build institutions. How do leaders build institutions? To be honest with you, leaders build institutions by building other leaders. I repeat that. One of the key ways by which leaders build institutions is by building other leaders. And the reason is because leaders understand that it takes leaders to build and strengthen institutions. Leaders understand that it takes leaders to build and strengthen institutions. Therefore, they endeavor to identify and build future leaders who can continue to build and strengthen institutions. Let me give you a clear case. Recently, Microsoft was declared to have exceeded Apple for the first time in a long while as the largest, the organization, the company with the largest share capital on the stock exchange very recently. And a lot of writers, a lot of articles attributed that to Satya Nadella. I remember when we were taking a program last year, I think in the second quarter of last year, we're talking about leadership. I remember referring to Satya Nadella and appreciating the work he was doing in Microsoft. And I also appreciated the work of those who identified him as a possible successor to those who built Microsoft. Now, the reality is that Microsoft was not initially built by Satya Nadella. Microsoft, like many people will know, was built by Bill Gates. It was envisioned by Bill Gates. However, in his lifetime, Bill Gates ensured that the succession process was in place. When I say Bill Gates, of course, there was a team around him. It's not that you ever do it alone, but he was the arrowhead. He ensured that a succession process was in place that eventually produced a Satya Nadella. And today, in Bill Gates' lifetime, the chances of Microsoft being an enduring organization, which can be said to be a definition of an institution in his lifetime, the possibility of Microsoft being an enduring organization is playing out before Bill Gates' very eyes. So I go back to my first question. What is succession management? Succession management can be described as the process of identifying those with the potential to lead the organization into a desired future. I'll say that again. Succession management can be described as the process of identifying, preparing, and putting in place those with the potential to lead the organization into a desired future. Now, succession management is not a one-off. Think about organizations that have existed for 175 years. I know an organization I relate with that has existed for 175 years. Some have existed for over 100 years. I remember an organization I engaged with about 20 years ago that was their 100th year of existence. If they were 100 years old, 20 years ago, that means they'll be 120 years old this year. And one of the things that excited me about the organization was the fact that they had enduring capacity. One of the things I love about this other organization that is 175 years old is they have continued to endure. Now, it's probably not surprising that we are discussing a concept like succession management and institution building, because in Amogate, from the time when we started to exist about a decade ago, one of our critical goals has always been building to endure. And that's why you will find that for us in Amogate, almost anywhere you find our name, the byline or the tagline is building to endure. We believe in building enduring institutions. We believe in building organizations that can exist way beyond those who, envisioned the organization to start with. We believe in transgenerational missions. We believe that what was begun with the leader, no matter how great the leader is, should not end with the leader. We believe in organizational continuity, and we believe in sustainability, and all of those things are some of the things that make an institution. An institution is built by, or can be said to be, envisioned by an individual, but it should never be built around an individual. I'll say that again. An institution can be said, or typically many times may have been envisioned by an individual, like Steve Jobs came up with the vision of Apple, but it should not be built around an individual. And that's why you really cannot talk about institution building without talking about leaders. Remember those points I made? I'm going back to those points. Leaders build institutions. Leaders build institutions by building other leaders. Leaders understand that leadership begins with one person, but it can never rest on only one person. An individual can envision the organization, but an individual can never be able to build an institution all by him or herself, except it is just not capable of having gargantuan impact. I remember when we were discussing the making of a transformational leader last quarter. One of the points I kept making in that program last quarter is that if you are truly going to have a gargantuan vision, you will never be able to accomplish it on your own. You can be the one to initiate the vision, but you must be a transformational leader who would raise other transformational leaders and, imbue into them the consciousness that they have to raise other leaders That is how to sustain a vision. That is how to build an institution. That is how to have an enduring organization. That is how to build a company that will not just succeed today, but will have the potential, the capacity, the resilience, the tenacity, and the likelihood of existing way beyond the founders for generations, not just for decades, actually for generations, as some organizations have proven today. My name is Timotolo Madara. This is Amogate Radio Communications, and we are discussing succession management and institution building. Now, let's go into a little bit of some specifics. We've tried to talk about what is succession management. Is that process of identifying leaders who have, they may not have, they may not yet have actualized all their potential, but those who have the potential to lead and to carry on the vision. Those who have the potential to continue to actualize the vision of the founders and, to be honest with you, when necessary, to expand upon it, to raise it to levels that are responsive to today's needs. Now, let me go back to the example of an organization that was created 120 years ago, right? When this organization was created 120 years old, there was a vision. The leaders who envisioned the organization had a vision. Now, successors do not necessarily depart from the original vision. For instance, Microsoft is still in the business of IT, but when Microsoft was created, I doubt if there was artificial intelligence the way it is today. I doubt if there was ChatGPT the way it is today. As a matter of fact, when Bill Gates was leaving Microsoft, I doubt if ChatGPT was what it is today. But in carrying forward the vision of the organization, of the founder, you find Satya Nadella, one of the ways by which he was able to, get Microsoft to the point where he overtook Apple was by being responsive to the current needs of the society, by being ahead of change, right? At the minimum, anticipating change. At the very, very minimum, responding to change. So when we are identifying leaders, and that's why I said succession management for institution building has a lot to do with leadership, identifying those who are already demonstrating the potential to a vision, of course, also demonstrating the capacity for implementation, also showing that they can raise other leaders, work with other leaders, birth ideas, follow through, and respond to the ever-evolving dynamic needs of society. So again, I'm saying this to say that leaders, especially successors, carry forward the vision of those who birth the organization. That is important. They don't depart completely from what was created. They don't depart entirely from what was envisioned, right? They carry on, for instance, in the sector. They carry on, for instance, to a large extent in the industry, right? However, where necessary, and it's not if, it will always be necessary, when and where necessary, they, so to say, modify and adapt their existing processes, in fact, sometimes products, to respond to the changing needs of society. And that is the way that they build an institution that remains relevant in today's ever-changing world. Now, you may want to ask, if I am not a leader, what is my business with succession management? What is my business with institution building? Last quarter when we were talking about transformational leadership, the making of transformational leaders, one of the things we emphasized was the fact that, honestly, given the demands of transformational leadership, not everyone needs to be a transformational leader, and that is fine. And in the same way, if you're not a leader, first of all, you need to ask yourself, is it that you are not in a leadership position, or that you are not a leader? Now, if it is simply that you are not yet in a leadership position, one of the reasons why this concerns you is because you can position yourself to be one of those that can be identified as a potential leader. 20 years ago, when I was in that organization, I was in a global leadership development program where the organization brought together about I think about 300 of us from about 100 countries in the world, because this is an international organization, and they were intentionally pipelining us for future leadership. And I remember saying to myself that day that no wonder this organization has existed for 100 years. They are always ahead in terms of their leadership pipeline. They understand that you cannot, and this is one critical element we are going to discuss in subsequent episodes, they understand that you cannot suddenly have succession. When I was preparing for this program, this episode, I said to myself, I need to emphasize the fact that succession management does not just happen. You do not just wake up at the last minute and think you will have succession. No, you have to be very, very forward thinking. You have to be very, very visionary. You have to be very, very proactive with succession management. It's a carefully planned process of one, identifying those who are likely to have the capacity to lead the organization, to strengthen the institution if you have already built an institution, or to ensure that the organization becomes an institution if you're still in the process of establishing what can be described as an institution. It's an extremely sensitive, important, critical process that involves identifying, like, so to say, not just a pipeline, but let me say a broad and sufficient pipeline of possible leaders. I'll say that again. It's a process that involves identifying. We've not yet talked about developing them. There's a lot to that, right? But to begin with, identifying a broad and sufficient pipeline of those who are likely to have the capacity to lead the organization into a continual future, right? So, because this process involves one identifying, and it also requires developing them, it's a carefully planned, systematic, and continual process of developing these people, again, ahead of the need. So you're talking about identifying potential leaders. After you identify them, take them through a process of developing them, again, ahead of the need to deploy them. Satya Nadella, you want to guess when he joined Microsoft? About 1992. If he joined Microsoft in 1992 and he became Microsoft's CEO, and became CEO in 2014, that means he had spent about 22 years in Microsoft before he became CEO. So this process of identifying leaders with the potential to lead the organization and guarantee its continual success, it's a painstaking and highly futuristic process. And that's why when we identify those leaders, we have to ensure that we are developing them, and we also have to ensure that we are deploying them into areas of increasing leadership responsibility, all ahead of the need to, have them take on the reins of the organization at critical leadership and management levels. I want to go to the man Satya Nadella succeeded. That was Steve Ballmer. Guess when Steve Ballmer joined Microsoft? Guess how long Steve Ballmer stayed in Microsoft? He joined Microsoft in 1980 as employee number 30. He then went on to become the CEO of Microsoft in the year 2000. Again, look at the number of years it took him. That was about 20 years. So that process of developing those with the capacity, yes, they have the potential, that's step one, but the potential is not equal to the performance. The fact that they have a potential does not mean that they can immediately be deployed. You identify them way ahead because there is a need to develop them thoroughly. There's a need to take them through a deep, broad, wide, thorough developmental process that would ensure that when the time comes, they can take the reins of the organization and ensure that you continue to have an institution. Back to the organization that I was recruited in about 20 years ago. Now, of course, I went on to leave the organization, but when I look at the people who are leading in the organization today, those that went through that management development program that I went through it with, it's not surprising, like I said to myself 20 years ago, that this organization had existed as a then for 100 years and now for 120 years. There were going to be deployed into increasingly higher levels of responsibility, but they were being prepared as far back as 20 years ago, just like you have Steve Ballmer being in Microsoft for about 20 years from 1980 before he became the CEO in 2000. Just like you also have Satya Nadella being in Microsoft from about 1992 before he would become the CEO in 2014, which was about 22 years. Again, I want to appeal to us as leaders. If you are an organizational leader, if you're an institutional leader, listening to me, I want to appeal to us. It is extremely important for us to recognize the need for building leaders. We need to build leaders because leaders build institutions and institutions endure. It takes that mindset of organizational continuity and sustainability to build an institution. Unfortunately, and I need to use the word unfortunately, as critical as succession management and institution building is, a study by Deloitte in 2022 found that about 68% of companies struggle with developing leadership pipelines. In other words, they struggle with succession management. We have tried to establish in this episode the criticality of succession management. We've tried to answer the question of what is succession management. We've tried to, and I'm saying the word try to because this is a topic we'll be looking at for the whole quarter, and there's a whole lot more to be said. But we've tried to, at least begin to introduce the concept of institution and to begin to address the need to build an institution. Remember those 4 questions we asked at the beginning? What is succession management? What are institutions? Why do we need to build institutions? And can institutions be built without effective succession management? Now, as critical, we've tried to show that institutions cannot be built without effective succession management because succession management involves the process of identifying leaders, or those who have the leadership potential, developing them and deploying them when necessary, right? So we've tried to show that leaders build institutions, right? We've tried to show that leaders build other leaders because they recognize that it would take that succession process to build and strengthen the institution. If the institution has been built already, it needs to be strengthened. If it's not yet been built, it needs to be built, right? And so those who are truly leaders recognize the need to build other leaders. Let me give you a simple illustration here. What would have happened if Bill Gates did not build Satya Nadella or did not build a process in Microsoft by which Satya Nadella could be identified and deployed when the time came? Remember what we said? Succession management helps us to ensure that we have the right people in the right leadership and management positions, especially when necessary. And this means that we need to be ahead. This means that we need to be building them ahead. And that's why we need a leadership pipeline. Remember what I said, as much as possible, you want to have a broad range, not necessarily too wide, but you don't want to have only one possible successor for a critical position. That's not a pipeline. A pipeline means that you have a number of people who can possibly step into that position where the need arises so that the organization can continue to live, can continue to exist, can continue to succeed, and honestly can continue to exceed the achievements of the previous leaders. Now, as critical as this is, unfortunately, about 68% of companies, according to the 2022 Deloitte study, were said to be struggling with developing leadership pipelines. This is part of why this matters to us, because we know from our experience in consulting that many organizations don't have that process. So it wasn't surprising for us to read that in 2021, another survey conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management found that only 23% of organizations reported having a formal succession plan in place. So as critical as it is, 68% are struggling with it, and only 23% say they have a formal succession plan in place. And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this program. We're here to offer our insights, offer our knowledge, share our experiences, because we know that succession management and institutions are critical not just for your organization, but honestly for many things that the world needs. Today, Microsoft, which has been one of our examples, our main examples today, is not existing for itself, much as they may have the market capitalization, they may have the profit, but they are also serving a world need. And so we need to build institutions. This is why we are passionate about it, because institutions help to guarantee that certain needs of humanity are continually met because organizations are run sustainably. Well, this is where we're going to draw a curtain on today's introductory session. I hope you have found it instructive. I hope that it's beginning to get you interested in the issue of succession. Either you're a leader or you're someone with the leadership potential, you need to think succession. If you're a leader, you definitely need to put succession in place to ensure that what you're building can outlast you. And if you're someone with the leadership potential, please also try to see how you can learn from this to ensure that you have what it takes to carry forward what your current leaders have envisioned. Thank you very much for doing this with us. It's been exciting, it's been interesting, and just the beginning. We look forward to having you same time, same station next week. My name remains Solomodara. We also look forward to hearing from you. Please follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Facebook, follow us on our social media platforms, and we look forward to getting your feedback. It's important to us. Thank you so much. And remember, think succession. Have a good day.